I'm Brian Carpenter, host of Fresh Air at 5, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Coming up on episode 213 of the House of EdTech, I've got an EdTech thought about EdCamps. I've got a recommendation where you're going to be able to choose your own adventure. I've got the House of EdTech VIP, and today I address a listener question: why aren't more teachers thirsty? Strike up the band. Welcome to the House of EdTech. My name is Chris Nessie. The House of EdTech launched in 2014, giving me the opportunity to speak with teachers, leaders, and creators so you can more effectively integrate technology, strengthen your pedagogy, and have more confidence in your classroom and school so you can make an impact. Get involved with the podcast by visiting my website, chrisnessie.com. Using technology isn't difficult, and this is where it begins. This is the House of EdTech. That's right, using technology isn't difficult, and you are in the right place if you are into using technology in your teaching, in your classroom. Welcome back. If you're a brand new listener, welcome for the first time. I hope by the end of this episode you will consider making the House of EdTech a part of your anytime, anywhere professional development, and will click that subscribe button or that follow button depending on where you're listening to the show. Thank you so much for being here. We're getting towards the holiday season, and things are ramping up here in the House of EdTech as we approach the holidays, because when we approach the holidays here at the end of November and getting into December, that means we are getting near the end of the calendar year, and that means it is almost time for the annual House of EdTech Smackdown. That's right, it's back once again for I think it's the 9th consecutive House of EdTech Smackdown. Been doing this every year since I launched the podcast back in 2014, and 2022 isn't going to be any different. The 2022 House of EdTech Smackdown is going to come your way this December. It's my last episode of the calendar year, and that's going to come out on December 18th, 2022. Now, the House of EdTech Smackdown is all about you. I need you to submit what you have loved in education technology this year, your favorite tech tip, tool, app, your recommendation. What one thing have you loved about education technology here in 2022? And we're going to put them all together, and that's going to make up the bulk of episode 215 of the podcast. In order for you to participate, I need your submissions, and I need them soon. In fact, the deadline is coming up. I need it by Friday, December 9th, 2022. And you're going to do that in one of two ways, and one is better than the other. You can go out to chrisnessie.com/feedback, and you can submit a written response to this question, and you can contribute to the Smackdown. Let me know where you teach, what you teach, and what your EdTech tip, tool, or recommendation is here for the end of 2022. Now, the better option, and we all like better, the better option is to go out to chrisnessie.com/voicemail and submit audio feedback and tell me who you are, your role in education, and what you are loving in education technology, and how to connect with you. And we'll put that into the podcast. And because it's audio, I would prefer your voice, because if you send me something that you wrote down, you take your chances as to the impression of you that I will do. So if you want your recommendation and your voice to come across as accurately as possible, go to chrisnessie.com/voicemail and send me that voicemail by Friday, December 9th, 2022. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to the Derek Larson. He has been listening to the House of EdTech for many years, and at some point, he started to track everything that was submitted on every Smackdown. So if you go to chrisnessie.com/all-time Smackdown, you will see a Google Sheet that Derek maintains that has all the things that other people have loved over the years. And if you still love any of those things and they made a difference in your practice in 2022, by all means, you can submit it again. That's fine. Great tools are great tools. Doesn't matter the time period. And if it's still great, it's still great. So I welcome you and invite you to participate in this year's Smackdown. Now, let's head over to the EdTech Thought. I'm calling this EdTech Thought, EdCamps are great. Now I could stop there because EdCamps truly are great. And after the last couple of years, what seems like a decade, I am seeing EdCamps return. And there was no bigger EdCamp that returned than the recently held EdCamp New Jersey. EdCamp New Jersey started in 2012, and I first heard of EdCamp in 2013 and immediately got involved as a volunteer organizer. And in 2016 and 2017, I took a more prominent role in EdCamp New Jersey. And now I, along with my friend Joe Juba, who is a math teacher in my school, we are basically the co-lead organizers of EdCamp New Jersey. And EdCamp New Jersey returned on Saturday, November 19th, 2022, after 2 COVID years away, and it was fantastic. So I would just like to share with you that EdCamps are a wonderful opportunity for you to take control of your professional development. Now, in many ways, you already do that because you're listening to the House of EdTech, and I'm sure you listen to other podcasts. But listening to podcasts is typically something that you do by yourself. I, as much as I love podcasts, have yet to sit around in a faculty room and listen to a podcast with my colleagues. So I'm not expecting people to do that. Although, if you ever decide to have a House of EdTech podcast listening party at your school, please let me know. And I would love to somehow be a part of that experience. So just reach out. But back to EdCamps. They are a great opportunity to connect with other people. And after the last couple of years, I think it is important, and now it's always been important, but I think it's important to again connect with other educators. And I don't even need to say that they need to be like-minded, because EdCamps and really any event you can attend in person isn't about finding the people who necessarily agree with you or see education the same way you do. The point of professional development is to push yourself forward and to get better and improve your own practice. EdCamps are a great way to do that because you control what happens. And I just want to remind you that that's what EdCamp is all about. It's the rule of 2 feet and going to a session. And, if it's not what you thought it was, or it's not what you expected, or it's not what you needed, get up and move on and take advantage of an opportunity like an EdCamp or an unconference where you can control your learning and anybody can step up and lead a session. I have to shout out Jackie, the student teacher, and also my Phase 1 student teacher, Jonathan, who comes into my classroom once a week, whereas Jackie is the full-time 5-day-a-week student teacher. They attended EdCamp New Jersey, and I had been talking it up, as you might imagine I would, for many weeks to both of them. In fact, when I first spoke to Jackie for the first time in August, one of the things I asked her in that conversation where we spoke for the very first time was, what are you doing on Saturday, November 19th? Clear your calendar because you're going to come to EdCamp New Jersey. And she did, and she had a ball. But her and Jonathan, they led a session as student teachers, pre-service educators, and their session was titled, I'm a student teacher, help! And it was one of the most highly attended sessions at our EdCamp, which I am happy to say, again, EdCamp New Jersey is, for all intents and purposes, it is the largest EdCamp on the planet, right? We have had in previous years upwards and over 1,000 people register for EdCamp New Jersey. We did not achieve or hit that goal this year, but I'm sure in the coming years we will bounce back with the total number of people who register and also the number of people who attend. But when you think about the proportions, a lot of people who could have attended EdCamp New Jersey did attend. And those people took control of their professional development. And I encourage you to either run your own EdCamp, get involved with one that you are familiar with, and start to reacquaint yourself with EdCamp and taking control of your professional development. Because if you're just relying on the PD provided to you by your school district, you are severely missing out. And I would recommend that if you already value something like EdCamp, spread the word. Encourage other people to attend. Bring a friend, bring two. Expose people to what something like an EdCamp has to offer. Consider this my PSA on why EdCamps are great. And that's my EdTech thought. And for this episode's EdTech recommendation, I want to recommend something that I think is pretty awesome. And it is called Twine. Twine. You can find it at twinery.org. Twinery.org. Twine is an open source tool for telling interactive, nonlinear stories. Choose your own adventure type stuff. And you don't need to be able to write any code to create a simple story with Twine. But you can extend your stories with variables, conditional logic, images, CSS, and some JavaScript when you're ready. Twine publishes what you create directly to an HTML file, so you can post your work just about anywhere. Anything you can create with it is completely free to use any way you like, including commercial purposes. But why do I bring Twine to you, a listener of the House of EdTech? I think Twine would be a great tool for individual students in grades 5 through 12. I think something that lets you create your own adventure would be great in language arts, social studies, computer science, math, health. I think something like this gives students a different way to be creative, because if you're going to write a choose your own adventure type story or piece of writing, you have to do a lot of work to create different scenarios, which I think extends your thinking and extends your creativity, which is where something like this would be very helpful. Now, it is not the flashiest tool, If you go out to twinery.org, there are examples, but if you are an English teacher, let's go down that hole for a second. If you're an English teacher and you have your students writing stories, this would be a great way to maybe do something more with their stories and extend their creativity. And again, they don't need to be flashy, but if you're looking for a way to maybe integrate some coding and some computer science into courses besides computer science, I think this is a great tool to check out. And now that I've discovered it, I'm going to have a conversation with Jackie, the student teacher, and whether she gets the opportunity to use this or not during the remainder of her time in my classroom, we'll see. But this is something I'm already spinning my wheels on to try out, maybe starting in January or at some point in the rest of this school year. Again, I think you should check out Twine if you're interested in creating choose your own adventure stories, and you can find it at twinery.org. And if you don't have a pen or a pencil ready, that's okay. Save the show notes. They're a swipe or a tap away. Maybe we'll just go with swap. They're a swap away in whatever app you're listening to. And you can also go out to chrisnessy.com/213, where you will also find a link to Twine. And that's my EdTech recommendation. So for this episode's featured content, I want to spotlight an email that I recently got from a listener of the podcast. So I want to give a big shout out to Brooke Anne Petrucelli. She is the technology coordinator at Deerfield Community School. And first, I want to share the email that she wrote me, which comes off the heels of episode 212, which was, "Are schools listening to teachers about EdTech?" So this is the email that Brooke Anne sent me. "You did inspire me this morning on my way to school. I often feel inspired after listening to you, but in this case, it was spot on. We do a Tech PD Day in January. This is a day with a tiny bit of training on something, and the rest of the day is for teachers to play with that tool and develop a lesson or unit with that tool and their team. I started planning of that day by doing a fairly deep technology survey. The most helpful comment was that teachers need the time to play with the tools. Last year, we worked on choice boards. This year, we are working on Nearpod. With choice boards, we just used Google Slides, which is standard at our school, and it went great. Creativity and unique lessons erupted, and it was a very productive day. Nearpod is expensive, and we are a tiny K-8 school. Only 3 of us are using Nearpod with our students, so hopefully this day will inspire some more to use it. I thought when making the Nearpod purchase that I had some teacher feedback, but it is never enough. This year, my survey will be to talk to each grade level team and find out what they use or would like to use. That is what you are responsible for today. I will probably stay with Nearpod as the Tech Day's tool of choice because it is wonderful, cross-curricular, and can span all age levels. But I'm hoping to hear some new perspectives or ideas of tools to use. I would love to get more teachers on board to pilot and make tech tool decisions. I am the tech coordinator, but I also teach technology literacy, so I can see how tools are used with students. I also work directly with IT to make sure tools fit in our framework with data privacy and hardware. The library media specialist is another person I depend on for making suggestions, as she is also pro-tech. But I find that teachers are too pressed for time to volunteer to pilot software, or many are just not interested. I have a hard time getting my head around that. We have training all throughout the year, and it's a struggle to get people to come. The water is there, but the horses are too busy or not thirsty. What do I do with that? Thank you, Brooke Anne." Well, in my email response to Brooke, I shared the following, and then I will expand upon those thoughts here for you listening to the show. I wrote back, "Brooke, first, thank you for listening to the podcast and for taking time to connect and email me. Feedback like yours helps me immensely. You've got a lot of good things going for you. The fact that you're an active classroom teacher is tremendous for the other hats you wear. If you can walk out of your school knowing you've done everything possible, then there's nothing else you can really do. I encourage you to continue to create opportunities, providing the water for your colleagues. Not everyone will be thirsty on your schedule, but they will eventually get thirsty. You're doing the good work, and I wish that there were more people with your approach." And then I just asked her if I could share her email on the show, and she did confirm that I could, which is why I'm sharing it with you. But I want to further expand on this idea of, I guess, apathy in our profession. And I know it's something that I've probably talked about here on House of EdTech. I've probably also brought it up on Podcast PD with AJ. And apathy runs rampant. And I certainly see it with professional development, right? You know, in my EdTech thought in this episode, I talked about the awesomeness that is an EdCamp. And people in my school, they know that I have an important role with EdCamp. They understand what it is, and I promote it, not at the point of annoying anybody, at least I don't think so, but not everybody in my school is willing to give up a Saturday to come out to something like EdCamp, right? They're perfectly content with getting their 20 to 25 hours of professional development that the district provides. So I think there's a lot of apathy in our profession. Now, it's really tough in somebody like Brooke Anne's case because she's providing PD that is provided by the district. And she's checking the boxes of asking for feedback and finding out what her teachers are interested in. She's got the support of another person in the building, her librarian, who is also pro-technology. But she makes the comment, teachers are too pressed for time to volunteer or pilot software. And the part that really sticks with me, many are just not interested. Let's brainstorm a little bit. How can we get people interested? And I know I've talked about this before. You've got to show them value. And I'm not saying somebody in Brooke Anne's position is not showing her teachers value, but you can't give up. You've got to keep creating those surveys and inviting teachers to participate. Because eventually someone is going to say yes. Eventually, enough people are going to fill out that survey where you feel you can make certain decisions with software or technology purchases. So you've got to keep asking. I know it can be discouraging. I was discouraged with EdCamp for a couple of things. One, you reach out to school districts to promote it, and then you find out that, school districts don't promote it. I emailed every single superintendent in the state of New Jersey. And in the state of New Jersey, there are probably 670 something superintendents. Out of those emails that I sent, one secretary from a superintendent responded to say, thank you so much for your email about EdCamp. We will be promoting, I sent a flyer. We will be distributing this flyer to our teachers and professionals in our district. One out of 689 districts responded. I'm not discouraged. I can sleep and put my head down at night knowing I made the effort to reach out to those individual school districts with something as awesome as EdCamp. So you need to keep sending out the surveys. You need to host the lunch and learn. You need to, do those PD sessions. Just don't give up. And I know that that's not a real concrete answer or a solution that I could, build a course around or write a book about, right? So it's just, you just can't give up. And I don't know any other way to put it, right? If you're like Brooke Anne, you're the tech coordinator or you're heavily involved in the process, keep inviting people to participate. Because the second you don't, or you relax how much you're inviting people, that's when they're going to notice and that's when they're going to complain. So keep inviting people to participate. Do those surveys, run those PDs, keep giving teachers the opportunity to choose and keep asking. That's my best advice. And if you have other advice, let's all work together. Let's keep this conversation going because we're at a crossroads in education. I don't know what it's like where you are, but maybe your community is experiencing teachers who are leaving the profession, or you're finding out that there's not enough young people who want to become teachers. Okay? It is a tough time to be an educator right now. There's no escaping that. So we need to work together. We need to figure out some of these issues. And I believe in the importance of having these conversations, which is why I dedicated a bulk of this episode to basically email feedback from my last episode, because it's important. And if you think it's important, I want to know what you think. Send me an email, feedback@chrisnessy.com, just like Brooke Anne did, or send me a voicemail, chrisnessy.com/voicemail. I can't guarantee that we're going to figure out the answers, but if we keep talking about it, we have a better shot. And now it's time for this episode's House of EdTech VIP, and I want to congratulate and shout out Miss Holly Buck. She is on Twitter @HollyLBuck. She's a mom, a wife, animal lover, and she's a K-8 Instructional Technology Coach from the great state of Connecticut. You should connect with Holly because we are connected. So, congratulations to you, Holly Buck. You are a House of EdTech VIP. Thanks for listening to this episode of the House of EdTech. If you're not subscribed or following, I hope you'll continue to make this podcast a part of your anytime, anywhere professional development. I want to thank Brooke Anne once again for sending in her great email as a follow-up for episode 212. Let's keep this conversation going. Share your thoughts on this episode or whatever is on your mind as it relates to education and technology. You can leave a comment on the show notes for this episode. Go out to chrisnessy.com/213. You can also send an email, chrisnessy.com/feedback, or the much more preferable voicemail. chrisnessy.com/voicemail is where you go. Now, if you enjoy the House of EdTech podcast, and if you're listening this far into the episode, there's no reason to say that you don't. So do me two favors. Number one, tell somebody else about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way to share a podcast that you love. Number two, and this one is optional, you can consider becoming an awesome supporter. If you are getting value from these episodes and my content and you want to give back, you can do that just like the following people do, episode by episode. Thank you to Catherine Abdallah, Brian Carpenter, and real quick, I want to shout out Brian Carpenter, the host of the Fresh Air at 5 podcast. Brian is on the verge of releasing his 100th episode, so make sure you check out Fresh Air at 5 and support Brian and his podcast. I do. Thank you to Aaron Cummings, Dan Gallagher, Peggy George, Jeff Herb, Mike Messner, Matt Miller, Patty Reefus, Lori Simpson, and Kyle Wilcox. If you'd like to become an awesome supporter, go to chrisnessy.com/awesome. And you can do that right in your app. The show notes are a swap, that's my new word, a swipe or a tap away in your player. chrisnessy.com/awesome. Again, want to invite you to participate in the 2022 Smackdown. Go to chrisnessy.com/voicemail to let me know what you're loving in EdTech in 2022, and do that by December 9th. The next episode is 214, and in that episode, I'm going to be sharing what I've learned from school podcasting. Being the advisor of the Zebra Podcast Network and working with students, we're going to learn something. Until next time, thanks for learning with me, and remember, using technology isn't difficult. Just give it a try.